I was there that first Good Friday. At first it was for me just like any other day. Little did I know that this would be the day that my life changed forever. I am a soldier, a centurion to be precise. That means that I have troops who work for me, troops who report to me. They are mine to command. And I worked for my country, which I love. Rome the beautiful, Rome the powerful, Rome the conquerors, Rome the triumphant, Rome the magnificent. I was proud to do my job, proud to serve my country, proud to put on my uniform and march in parades. I was not afraid to lead my troops into battle either. I did what my country required of me, and I was proud to do it. It was a job, yes, but it was a good job. And one of the parts of my job was carrying out punishments and sentences such as crucifixion. Crucifying someone was gruesome and gory, no doubt. It was definitely not my favorite part of my job. But part of my job was to keep order. The rule of law is important. Without a firm hand in governing, without the military presence of people such as me and my troops, people might revolt. They might attempt to overturn the system that kept me and my family safe and healthy and happy. And so crucifixion, as terrible as it was just one of the jobs that fell to me and to the soldiers that worked for me. To be crucified was a shameful death. It was a difficult death. It was a death that sent a message. It was a death that we reserved only for those people who we saw as beneath us, the conquered people, people whom we had already put underneath our feet. A Roman citizen was never, ever crucified. Crucifixion was shameful. It brought shame on your family and those who were associated with you. It was a torturous death, to be certain, but the people who were crucified, the torture for them was not the main point. The main point of crucifying someone was to make an example of them. It was a very public death, something that was stretched out over hours and sometimes even days, so that everyone could witness it, could walk by and could hear and smell and see those who were hung up there as an example. Crucifixion did not take place on a hill far away, as we sometimes like to imagine. People were crucified close to the road, along popular traveling paths outside the city, close by so that passers-by could see what was going on, close enough for them to witness the agony and the shame of the people hanging there, and thereby to be reminded, you don't cross Rome. Don't get any ideas above your station. Don't try to change the world, or you could be next. You don't want to end up like those pitiful people, hanging on a cross, crying out in agony. Before that Good Friday, I didn't question my role in putting people on crosses at all. Even though it was unpleasant, it was part of my job. Sometimes you need to be tough to keep law and order in a good working society. I was tough. But one Friday made me question everything that I stood for, everything I thought was right, everything I thought I knew about the way the world worked. When I first saw the prisoner, because that's all he was to me at the time, my first reaction was actually one of surprise. Why was this guy deemed worthy of this kind of punishment at all? We crucify people to break them, to make an example of them. I know this guy was supposed to have been a freedom fighter of one kind or another, but when I saw him, he was already so badly beaten, he hardly looked like a threat to anyone, let alone to the great and mighty Rome. Crucifixion was meant to humiliate the person who was crucified, but anyone with eyes to see could see that this guy had already been humiliated. And he was one of the Hebrew race. And the Hebrews practice their own religion. They have their own leaders. They have people who are supposed to govern them. They actually don't like Roman officers like me and like my boss Pilate actually getting involved with their affairs. But something about this guy must have set those leaders off, because it was those leaders, the chief priests and the teachers of the law, who insisted that Rome get involved. They had insisted to Pilate, the guy I report to, not only that he must keep this man in prison, but also that he should put him to death. Now, Pilate wasn't happy about it, actually. He didn't want to do it. He thought this man was small potatoes nothing to concern himself about, certainly not worthy of the humiliating death that was crucifixion. But even though it was against his better judgment, Pilate allowed these religious leaders to get their way. He signed off on the order. And now it was my job to carry that order out, even if none of us believed it was all that necessary. It was not me or my soldiers who wanted this man crucified. I was just doing what they insisted I do. But even though it was under unusual circumstances, it still didn't make much of an impression on me, to be honest. Really, it was all in a day's work. It was the job that I had, and so it was the job that I did. The written notice of the charge against him read, "The King of the Jews." Oh, how we laughed at those words. King of the Jews, indeed. Look, here he is, weak and small and beaten and derided and hanging on a cross. This is no king. Where were his followers? He was supposed to be a king, I thought, a revolutionary leading a revolt. Otherwise, he would not be given the kind of death we reserve for revolutionaries. But if he was truly a man who was seeking power, where were those who followed behind him? Where were those he'd convinced he was someone special? Where were those who heard him teaching and had decided to follow him? All I could see hanging around were some women, broken-hearted, weeping, hardly the kind of people Rome fears. Some king. Those who were closest to him while he lived, those who said that they were willing to go with this man wherever he would lead them, while they were nowhere to be found now. What kind of leader doesn't even have his best followers at his side at his darkest hour? People who walked by him hurled insults at him. They said things like, "So, you who are going to destroy the temple and build it up in 3 days, come down from the cross and save yourself. If you're something special, if you're the kind of person you say you are, then come down from there. Surely the Son of God can come down from a cross." But instead, I actually thought God's Son would never have been hung on a cross in the first place. And those chief priests and the teachers of the law, they were not content simply to get their way, to have forced our hand and insisted that this man die. They too mocked him as he hung there. He saved others, they said, but he can't save himself. Let this Messiah, the King of Israel, come down from the cross that we may see and believe, they mocked. Their mocking was pretty convincing, I have to say. That man hanging on the cross did not look like someone who trusted in a very reliable God. If God, the God he trusted in was real, and if that God wanted him, then surely he would not be hanging there. Even the other prisoners, those who shared his fate that day, hanging to his right and to his left, got into the action, insulting him in similar ways. And after hours of watching this torture, I was beginning to lose my stomach for it. Most of the people who were shouting at him had by this time stopped. It seemed rather pointless for this to keep going on, as it tended to do with crucifixion. Whatever this man was, he certainly wasn't long for this world. I remember being startled when he cried out loudly in Aramaic, my God, why have you forsaken me?" If ever there was a man forsaken by God, I thought, it was him. Then after an impossibly long time, it was finally over. He cried out loud and breathed his last. Everything that I saw and heard right up until that moment confirmed what I thought I already knew. What I thought when I first saw him. He was nothing. He's broken and defeated and worthy of being forgotten. He's weak. He's the king of nothing. Whatever claims he had made, whatever he had said about himself, it was clearly wrong. His own religious leaders wanted him gone and out of the way. It seemed that everyone who saw him hanging there had something mocking and insulting to say to him. His followers had deserted him. If ever there was someone who knew his God, well, his God had abandoned him too. But then, Jesus gave up his spirit, and the world changed. When Jesus released his spirit, something incredible happened. Although I didn't actually see it for myself, being a Gentile and unable to go into the inner part of the Jewish temple, Rumors began to circulate almost instantly that the large curtain that hung in the temple had been torn in two from top to bottom. That is something that no one can do with human hands. It has to be the work of God. And when Jesus died, everything changed. The moment of Jesus' death is the decisive turning point in the whole biblical story, and it was the decisive turning point in my life too. Because at that moment, the moment when Jesus gave up his spirit, I felt it. I felt the release of something so real and so powerful that the world would never be the same ever again. It was terrifying, actually, because everything I thought I knew up until that point in my life, everything I thought I knew about the world, everything I had served for my entire life, it was wrong. I realized that my entire life I had been wrong. Now, I'd participated in crucifixion before, probably at least a dozen times or so before I participated in this one. And when I first saw this man, I thought that he was broken and weak and the furthest thing from the Son of God, no matter what he had said or claimed during his lifetime. But then I witnessed the moment of his death, and I had been wrong about everything. And I was terrified because all I could think of in that moment is, what have we done? And that is actually where I was left on that first Friday, the Friday that I still struggle to call good. I was left on my knees, looking at God's own Son hanging on the cross because I helped to put him there. I was terrified at the extent of my own wrongdoing. I was just doing my job. And although you know that there's more to this story, on that day when the world shifted beneath me, I had no idea that there was any more to come, that anything would come next. But I also knew in that moment, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that this man was not, in fact, abandoned by God. I knew instead, to the bottom of my very soul, that surely this man was the Son of God. And that revelation, it changed my entire world.